Stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh, look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays, because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well this morning, this beautiful Sunday morning. Well, it's still dark out where I am, but maybe it's brighter where you are. Hopefully so. The end of another week, and once more into the breach of DEI extravaganzas. I had thought about doing another border news digest this week, but looking through the border news stories, even though there have been some significant events therein, there's only been a couple, and it wouldn't have made for much of a stream to just have one or two stories about the same subject. So I think I might wait another couple of weeks and gather up some more stories before I do another border digest. So apologies if you were expecting that. I had talked about it the days previous, but I changed my mind. I can do that because I'm an American. At least as far as I know. So who's joining me for this Sunday adventure into diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting and other such things? Mike R., Absolutely Degenerate, Funtime Bats, Tyler F., Rotten Corpse, who else? Somnamnul Nation, Tyrannus Alexandrius Tremirlich. My vocal cords are still waking up. Pardon me, I've had my morning cocoa, but my brain is still trying to escape sleep. Tia Theorix, hello. Silent B, Arc 210, Brittany Holland, Bridget, Keeverdam. I remembered you this time. How could I forget? Kyle Mack, You're Ridiculous Lunatic. Mike Savage, Robert Pincus. Anybody else here? Okay, I think I got everyone. If I missed you, I'm sure someone will correct me. Shadowclaw, good morning. And Keeverdam has helpfully provided the GoFundMe for little Rosebud, and that is Twisted Skipster's little puppy that was hit by a car and has a fractured hip and is in need of help for vet bills. Out of an $800 goal as of this recording, we are at $600, almost there. So very close. If you happen to have a couple of bucks to spare, please consider taking a look at that GoFundMe. Or if you do not have a couple of bucks to spare, which is understandable given the time of the year and just after the holidays, please consider sharing the GoFundMe on your local social media. So there you go. And what do we have today? Well, I spotted this podcast. So there's not much to watch as far as videos are concerned. So you can just kind of like do something else or go off in a different tab and just listen to this in the background or listen to this as you're driving or whatever. You're not missing anything visual except for my lovely avatar. But the title caught me, as so many things do. Is your organization diversity, equity, and inclusion ready? And I just found that an interesting notion. Like, if your organization isn't DEI ready, doesn't that mean it needs DEI in the philosophy of DEI? I'm not quite sure what that is. Is there prep work to do before someone arrives to tell you all about this intrusive, accusatory, somewhat divisive philosophy for business? I don't know. And especially these days with the cost cutting that so many corporations are doing in downsizing their workforces and finding ways to save money, the DEI programs tend to be one of the first things on the chopping block, as we've learned in previous Sunday streams. So yeah, what does it mean to have your organization DEI ready? I don't know, but I'm curious to find out, and maybe you are too. So with that, a couple more hellos. Green Badger Outdoors, the original Shroom, and if I missed anyone again, apologies. But if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning. But let's get into it. I don't know who our speakers are, except for the title here, Women Taking the Lead with Jody Flynn. Is your organization diversity, equity, and inclusion ready? Well, let's discover that together. The full presentation is just over 40 minutes. I will be going for an hour and a half in real time, unless there is some reason to go longer. Unless we finish up sooner than that, at which point I'll finish up sooner than that. Here you go.
DEI work within organizations has gotten a lot of press lately.
Yeah.
But what does it take for a company to truly become more diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
I have been wondering the answer to that question for years now. What exactly is the definition? How do you know when you've achieved it? Because as far as I've been told, you can never achieve it. It is a forever process that never has an end point because someone's got to keep getting paid.
To dive more deeply into the topic for this episode, I've brought on Wayma Hoover. Wayma is a DEI leader and former global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Google.
Ooh.
She has also held executive roles at multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Chief Diversity Officer and Global Head of Culture, Inclusion, and Diversity at Sanofi, and Global Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Pfizer.
Wow, that is quite the resume, especially at Google, where they've had some struggles in recent years with their DEI efforts. I've actually done a couple of videos on this in the past where they had to put out their yearly statistics of, here's our demographic split amongst our workforce. Look how much more work we have to do, even though we have limitless funds and are gung-ho about this philosophy. Somehow, they can't seem to bring themselves to be diverse. It's quite interesting. But okay, she's a former. All right, at Pfizer even.
Wayma is a frequent speaker to business leadership audiences. She is working on a book and has authored many articles such as How to Transform DEI Energy into Action in the Workplace from Inc. and has been featured on Diversity Inc. and other podcasts. So clearly, Wayma knows her stuff, and we are ready to have a really good conversation with her.
I am glad Wayma knows her stuff. I do my best to only find people who comport themselves to be experts in whatever topic that we're talking about. So I'm glad to have somebody who is so experienced, which means I'm sure we'll get some straight answers, I hope.
Her.
Oh, I don't want music accompaniment. Can we get past this? Is this something
New to the Women Taking the Lead podcast, founder of Women Taking the Lead, a leadership development that works successfully.
Sorry, guys. I don't know if that music is copyrighted or something. Get to the talk.
Search.
No.
You'll
No.
to the invitation.
No.
Welcome to the Women Taking the Lead podcast, Wayma.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Jody.
I so appreciate you being here, and everyone has had a chance to hear all the amazing things that you have done all over the world for many big name companies. Like, people will, definitely are aware of the companies that you've worked for, and they have great names for themselves. But if you could share with everyone a little bit about what is your day-to-day life like, and what are some of the things that you enjoy doing?
Do you like long walks on the beach? Are you a Gemini?
Yes, of course. And I think, I have like a daily mantra that I, wake up to. I wake up to making sure that I am the creator of all things that bring me joy, happiness, and peace. So that is what I wake up and I tell myself. And one of the next things I do is make sure I get outside. And
I am the creator of my own happiness, joy, and peace. Well, I mean, that's true. That's a personal responsibility territory. Okay. And you try to get outside. All right. Go touch grass, as they say, as the kids say these days. Go touch grass. Thank you, John Migda. My therapy dog listened to your last, then hung himself. The term is hanged, John. Just to be a little corrective there. Hanged. Yeah. It's not hung. Hanged. Sorry, that's. I appreciate your generosity. Sorry for your therapy dog. I don't know where to go with that, especially since your avatar is a smoking frog. Do frogs have therapy dogs? I suppose they'd have to. Thank you, John. Anyway.
And walk. So my daughter is up at 5:30 to go to school. Her bus comes at an insanely early time in the morning, 6:40. And so I'm up at 5:30 and have done like a 2-mile walk by 7:30 a.m. And that does two things for me.
Wait. You spend 2 hours walking every morning? Right. Your daughter's bus picks her up at 6:40. By 7:30, you've done a 2-hour walk. What?
One, it helps me really be able to process what I have going on for the day. And from a mental standpoint, gear myself up to be able to show up, think about what is my thought process, how will I embark on those things. And then two, I just enjoy now, especially during this time of year, breathing in the cold, fresh air and giving myself that, nature therapy. So that is two interesting things that, help me set my day and the pace and the energy that I bring.
I definitely resonate with a lot of that. My partner is a high school teacher. So yes, to the early mornings, you can't get away from it. But I do love it. It gives me a little bit of runway also to have that morning routine. And for me, and it's, for you, so important to have that time. And I know there are some people who are like, but I'm not a morning person. And I always say, it's not about what time you do it. It's about, do you take time first thing?
I get up every morning on the weekdays around 4 a.m. because the clients that I have to deliver data to are operating on the East Coast or elsewhere in the world. And so I have to be on their clock, and I get a lot of stuff done in the first 2 hours of my day. And I don't really have time for energetic walks, runs, thinking about my own power. Okay, whatever. And
whatever time that is for you, because it's so important. And yes, the cold air was right before I moved to Virginia. I was staying with my sister in Massachusetts. It was January, February. And I was like, now I'm realizing how much I like the feel of cold air on my face.
Oh my God. I don't care.
But it was like that. It was that moment to really appreciate something, but I go back for holidays so that I can always get cold air around the holidays. So I'll enjoy that. Well, Wayma, I'm really excited that you're here to have a conversation with me and to share all your wisdom with the women who are listening to this podcast. There were definitely some things.
Wait. I'm listening to this podcast. Am I not allowed to absorb the wisdom? Or is this a podcast that only women can listen to? Did I miss something? Was there a disclaimer at the top of this?
That stood out for me when I was just checking you out online, your LinkedIn profile, some YouTube videos, and just, reading your bio. It really caught my curiosity, the work that you're doing, because I'm 100% in love with it. But I know it's challenging work. And something that stood out to me in your LinkedIn profile, you talk about embedding DEI into people processes.
Oh, yeah. No, we're all about embedding DEI into people processes because it's that first word in DEI. How do you achieve that? How do you treat people in order to achieve that first word in DEI? That's really the important question.
Okay. I when I read that, I'm like, that's amazing.
Really, just that phrase alone. Wow, that's amazing. Wow. Well, putting 4 words together. That's amazing.
What does that look like on the ground level?
Yes. Okay. Take it back. I'm walking it back right now. Okay. Maybe her super cheery, kind of kissy attitude is all sort of a Trojan horse to actually ask some direct and important questions. Yes, what does that look like on the ground level? What does that mean to embed or entwine or enmesh DEI into people processes? Will she give us a concise and detailed answer, you think? Can you be both detailed and concise? Possibly.
Embedding DEI in the people processes, because I know with some different organizations I've been a part of, either volunteering or working with, we talk about where can we bring DEI into all the things I'm doing. So if you could tell us a little bit about what that looks like and what the process is.
Yes.
Yeah. So, when I talk about that, it really is around making sure diversity, equity, inclusion is organically born into the fabric of how an organization operates.
What?
And to do that, it really has to be a part of the ethos and composition of an organization. So I'll go into the actual processes, but I think it has to start much larger than that.
Whoa. It has to be organic, but then it's not because you're introducing it and you're having to embed it. If if I'm moving through the world right now and everything else, and I'm just kind of minding my own business, and the wind hits my face, and I get that cold air coming at me, and I feel that sensation of the interaction between my lungs and the cold air in my skin, that's organic. That's sort of an organic process and everything else. If I'm suddenly struck by a rock that somebody then throws at me that gets dug into my cheek, and it gets embedded into my skin, I guess, gravity, inertia, the tearing of particles and things. I suppose that is organic after a fashion, but it's rather intrusive and interrupts an otherwise pleasant experience. How is embedding DEI an organic process?
If you think about an organizational strategy and actually their mission, what are they here for, right? Whether it be a products company, whether it be a pharmaceutical company, whether
profit. That's what they're there for. They're for profit, increasing the value of the company and enriching the investors and the owners. They might have a humanitarian or some other sort of high-minded philosophy elsewise insofar as the services they provide or the products they produce, but ultimately they're there to make money. Yay, capitalism.
Whether it be a technology company, you really are looking at how they touch their customers and patients and make sure they reach them and meet them where they are. And to do that, you have to have an insight and openness to invite everyone in and to make sure that your processes, systems, approaches don't exclude or don't provide opportunity for everyone to be able to benefit from your work or your services.
Okay, sounds very utopian. What does that look like on the ground? Specifically, what do you do to achieve that?
And so part of it is really understanding kind of what is your purpose, your mission, your values.
Profit. Let's just cut through all the nonsense and be very pragmatic. My purpose and values and my organization and my company is profit. Everything else might be window dressing and may indeed have some sincerity to it, but at the end of the day, without profit, there is no business. So let's just pretend company X focused on profit.
And ensuring that as a part of that process, you have embedded inclusion, equitable, fair treatment, opportunities to be able to identify and connect with all of your customers, clients, and also how are you mirroring your marketplace through your employee base?
How are you mirroring your marketplace through your employee base? So you want your employee base to quote unquote reflect your customers? Why? Why? Does a particular type of person share the exact same philosophy, needs, wants, and desires as somebody else? I guess it depends on your product and what you're trying to serve. But okay, how do you achieve that? What do you do in your processes, in your hiring, in your recruitment, in your retention, in your promotion? What do you actually do on the ground to achieve that? What are the mechanisms involved? You're the many-companied, professional, experienced expert. Your interviewer asked you for what does that look like on the ground? And
how are your employee base reflecting the patients and customers you have in very thoughtful ways?
Or maybe my employees should reflect excellence in their fields and what they're doing in order to provide the products and or services the company's providing. If my workforce reflected the customer base, then the customer base wouldn't need my workforce, right? They'd be doing it themselves. Or are you talking about something else?
And if you do that, then looking at pulling it into your organizational processes becomes much easier.
Like what?
Because you're basically taking that roadmap that you have set through your strategy, your purpose, your mission, your values, and actually now putting them into practical programs and practices.
Yeah, what are the practical programs and practices? I don't understand. Nothing you've said so far has made any practical sense. So describe a program or an initiative that you enacted or helped facilitate in one of your previous companies, and how did that work on the ground, mechanically? Why? Every time I do one of these things, and it is a rare day if I ever come across the same DEI consultant or expert or advocate or whatever twice. And yet we always run into the same thing. They're asked a direct question and we don't get answers. We get concepts and buzzwords, abstracts and ethereal nonsense. What do you do? Describe your workday.
Such as your diversity recruitment efforts,
yes.
Looking at how you assess leadership, right?
How do you assess leadership? What is a effective way to assess leadership to achieve DEI?
Looking at not only what people do, but how they do it, the way that they actually drive inclusive behaviors, the way that they are assessing talent and ensuring that being open to different styles of leadership, different opportunities for people to be able to bring their own unique perspective based on their background, their gender, their age.
You see how she stumbles right there? It's always background. They always start with background. They don't want to say race. They mean race, but they always say background. I've seen this for the last 6 years. Since one of the first videos I did that had a chief diversity officer in it was the guy who was the chief diversity officer for eBay. And they always predicate everything with something like backgrounds or perspective. And then they might filter in more specifics like gender, like age. Okay, what does my gender inherently inform me of, aside from the biological processes thereof? What does my age inherently inform me of? If I'm 100 years old, but I've done nothing with my life, what does my age have to do with anything? What? This lady has been a top executive in giant companies, and she's asked a straight question. What does it look like on the ground? I mean, again, credit to the interviewer. She asked her a very straight question. What does it look like on the ground? And we're still up in the clouds.
And that the environment allows for that and does not minimize people that actually have a different approach and or over indexes a particular style or way of working.
Style or way of work. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Give us an example. You must have some.
And so those processes are everything that we're familiar with or may not be familiar with. Looking at pipelines for growth, where do you actually have the opportunity to make sure that your promotions and the development program touches and represents all, that you are looking at not only who you bring in, but the way that you bring in, right? Some of the things that I'm working on right now that are very progressive practices is the onboarding process for employees and ensuring that diversity, equity, inclusion is included in that.
How is that included? What does that look like? What are you actually doing? Okay. Describe a classic onboarding process, right? Your boilerplate, old school, vanilla onboarding process. Now tell us what the onboarding process looks like with DEI involved in that. How is it different? Compare and contrast. Will you tell us this?
Recognizing if you bring people in that are, of underrepresented community, and they're coming into a very homogenous environment.
Homogenous. What do you mean by homogenous? What defines in your mind homogenous, might I ask?
You may have to take a different approach to making sure they're set up for success.
Why? Why do I need to consider people as needing special help because they fall into a different demographic? What are you talking about? Give me an example. If person X shows up and they are from a quote unquote underrepresented community, okay, and they're coming into the company, which is, however you've defined it, and I can only imagine, and I can imagine quite a bit, as homogenous. What special steps do I need to take for this person as compared to someone who falls within that homogenous environment? What are you talking about?
You may have to have a high touch, expand their network, give them peer mentors, ensuring that they have the necessary tools. I'll be coaching, I'll be employee resource groups to help.
Employee resource groups? Oh boy, ERGs.
Their integration. So that's what I mean when I talk about embedding it into the process.
No. You have not defined anything. You have not defined anything. That's what I mean when I talk about embed. No. Gosh, this is frustrating because it happened every single time. I don't pick these things out because I know ahead of time what they're going to say. But every single time I look up one of these diversity consultants, I get the same nonsense. It is so frustrating. It's like looking for the Holy Grail. I would like somebody to just sit down and give it to me plain. I came into the company and it was this way. And so I enacted these programs, and those programs involve changing things in this way and this way and this way. Instead of doing it like this, we now did it like this, and we achieved the result of this. Why is that so difficult? What does it look like on the ground? What do you do? I really hope our interviewer sticks with that, even if she's being all kissy friendly about it, sticks with that and holds her feet to the fire and actually gets an answer. I really want to know, because it seems like from my perspective, okay, nearly every DEI expert I've ever listened to, it sounds like a con job, because it's all just big words and high-minded ideas with no specificity. Now, maybe it is a con job. I haven't been given much to believe elsewise, but I'd like to at least hear what it is that people actually do when they are in these positions. Even if it ends up sounding like a con job after the fact, I'd like some details. I'd like some specificity. Why is that so difficult to do?
Is really the output of making sure that it's a pull through from the position that organizations are taking, their commitment through their ambition that they set. And that is actually pulled into practical, tangible processes that affect every level of the people processes.
Like what?
Okay, that completely makes sense. And
no, come on. Don't encourage this. Oh, please. That completely makes sense. And it made absolutely no sense. She said nothing. Nothing. A change of buzzwords and buzz phrases and pablum that said nothing. Ah, man. I should hang out a shingle. I've said it for years. With as much of this stuff as I've absorbed over the years, I should just hang out a shingle, call myself a diversity and inclusion expert, and get a paycheck for going into a place and allowing them to say they have a DEI program. And just have talks with people. Offline, I've done at least one interview in the past, but offline, I've talked to many people who have come to me and said, I had to go through this DEI thing in my company. And I get descriptions of what they went through. And it's all exactly the same. And the end result of all of it is everybody felt uncomfortable or everybody felt like this was a waste of time. The only people I ever hear from that say that this is a productive process or a necessary process are the people pulling paychecks for enacting it, or the executives who are forced by their superiors to actually go through this process and facilitate it, not as the hired expert, but just because that's what they've been told to do. And they don't really have any other way around it until they can talk to somebody privately and say, yeah, I had to go through this and it was nuts. That didn't make any sense. Maybe she's just sort of buttering her up and getting her ready for a more direct question.
in the example of onboarding, you can see where, okay, here are some things that might be missing and here are some things that we can include.
Like?
With some of the other things, do you have an example, like a story you can share?
Yes.
Not naming any names.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm going back and forth. I'm such a yo-yo with our presenter here because she's saying the exact same things that I would say. She's being way nicer and more accommodating about it than obviously I would be as this cynical old fart over here. But okay, all right. She's asking for an example. Do you have a story? She must have a story. Oh, okay. Let's see what she does with this.
I know you've worked with companies that have really good intentions and really wanted to do good work, but where you came in and you saw like the obstacles.
Yes.
And what you identified and what you put in place instead to help make the environment and the processes more inclusive and diverse.
Oh, okay. All right. Again, I'm taking a step back. Kudos to the interviewer. She's being very nice and accommodating, but she's asking the right questions. Whatever else our speaker, our subject may say, I have to give it to Jody Flynn. Jody Flynn, if you're out there, if you're listening to this in any way, shape, or form, kudos. I have listened to countless interviews, panel discussions, company promotional videos, and so on. And I can count on my one hand how many times I've heard an interviewer actually ask relevant questions and direct questions without padding everything and giving the interviewee a whole bunch of outs on the subject. Okay, so kudos to you. Let's see what she says.
I mean, I would say that that's every organization. So I think every organization is really kind of focused on that. I do think that it is also around the readiness of the organization. And I say that because if an organization is going through a significant amount of change and, for example, has either divested or brought on or companies, organization, your focus on DEI is going to look quite different from an organization that has been really set in and actually in growth mode, right? And so one example, like I can share, is one organization I went in, kind of came into, was actually transitioning to a global business unit model, meaning that the business units were no longer aligned by function, but was aligned by global region. And because of that, the focus of diversity and inclusion is that it should be something that we can track globally. Because if we are moving to this model, we need to make sure that as we're transitioning our practices, our products, how we're looking at business growth, we need to make sure we do that with our talent.
Wait. Okay. Now I'm no MBA, etc. So I've got a layman's perspective on this. They're moving from a division based on function to a division based on global region. So basically you're going from this is the widget department and that is the gizmo department to that is the widget and gizmo department for the North American sector. And that is the widget and gizmo department for the South American sector. That kind of thing. Is that what I'm going? They're splitting everything up into regions. Okay. All right. I could see, and maybe I'm wrong, I could see how then, if you're focusing your sales on a regional basis rather than a product basis, you might have to change how you market things to different parts of the world based on culture, custom, language, and so on. So if that's what she's talking about, and I'm just guessing here, I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible, then I could see there being a need for a change to a global mindset rather than a product mindset. Granted that I am understanding what she's saying.
So we ended up putting in, and I suggested, a global representation expectation for women to actually have the leadership roles and take on roles of increasing responsibility and career mobility in these global units. And we created programs to make sure that we had flexible work environment, in that some women may not be able to uproot themselves and move to another country for career opportunities. So how are we setting up the conditions that people can work flexibly and still have opportunities for roles at increasing levels without having to relocate, disrupt family, or really consider having to make a life decision between family and work because of that?
Why is that purely a female concern? Why is any of that specifically a concern for women? What men can't be concerned about uprooting themselves and their families? Men don't have any concerns about work-life balance? Are you ensuring that women have first dibs on leadership roles in the company? How would you go about doing that? How did you enact that initiative? How did you avoid the legal entanglements of sexism in the workplace? Those would be my follow-up questions.
So in addition to having the global women as a representation marker that we're looking for leadership positions, but also the environment, making sure that we had global flexible work that was aligned to and given at all of our markets to promote the onboarding and more senior roles for women in the organization.
Okay, that still doesn't answer anything. What does global flexible work, what does that mean? I thought you were talking about global in the sense of like the actual planet, like different departments for different parts of the world. You're talking about global as in just company-wide? We start mixing and matching terms and contexts, and I get all kinds of lost, which might actually be the point, depending on who's doing the speaking. But regardless, women specifically, this is only geared towards women. The considerations are just for women. Family doesn't matter to people, regardless of their gender. Okay.
Yeah. And what I heard and what you said was like a few factors are involved with this. The company has to be ready for it. I mean, we can all get that. You know?
How do you, oh my God, you guys, I mean, again, credit to Jody Flynn for her questions so far, but there's way too much allowance being given for a complete lack of specificity. What are you talking about? Be ready for it. Be ready for what? And how are you? Give me an example. Even if it's a hypothetical, just give me a practical example of what you're talking about. Just come on.
You know, if they're, you know, if middle management is like, yes, let's move forward with this. This is great. But senior management is like, yeah, we're not that invested.
Well, then senior management trumps middle management because they're the bosses. Like, what?
It's not really probably going to go.
And I say that because if there is not a readiness and you, for example, we do the former, what I just said, okay, now that we're moving to a global business unit, we're going to not track the diversity of women in leadership roles.
We're going to track the diversity of women in leadership roles. Okay, so you're going to start keeping a tally. Okay.
But if you don't do the second step, which making sure that they can not only get the roles, but succeed in the roles, because their leaders, their teams know that they have to operate in a more flexible virtual environment, and that those women they're either going to relocate, uproot, or they're not going to be able to take those positions. So
how do you ensure that someone succeeds? That was the part that caught my brain out of everything else, which sounded like some legally questionable and ethical nonsense. How do you ensure that someone succeeds in their role? I mean, what if they're lousy at their job? What if you give them every tool, every opportunity, all the therapy, counseling, coaching that you could possibly provide, but they still flounder? How do you ensure they succeed? Like as a pity party kind of thing? You just hand them a participation badge and move them up the ladder? What?
That's where the commitment and the readiness has to be at the center of these actions so that it can be holistic interventions.
Holistic intervention? What are you even talking about? This is just buzzword salad city.
And
yes,
just not base, very, very one-line kind of window dressing that solves, maybe solves a problem or gives them a talking point on the year-end diversity report, but truly helps move the needle.
But you just said you wanted them to track the women in leadership roles. You're the one promoting a quota. You're the one promoting a window dressing philosophy on this. What do you... Oh, I am in the wrong business.
Yes. So it's not, okay, that's great. So it's cyclical too. They're all tied together, like the readiness, the metrics, and having the environment.
Okay, so far I've interpreted readiness as, is senior management interested in a DEI program? If they're not, then they're not ready for it. Okay, readiness versus interest. You're mixing terms and definitions here.
That support the work as well. And I have heard a lot of companies, that's something they've gone through where they set a goal to bump the numbers.
Yeah, bump the numbers. We're not talking about people now. We're not talking about talent. We're not talking about perspectives and backgrounds and skills and abilities. No. We're just talking about quotas.
They did temporarily. Yeah. And then ultimately what they're looking at is we didn't move the needle.
Yeah, because if you hire for aesthetics and not for ability, you're going to have a lot of turnover because you're going to have people being put into jobs that they are not suited for based on their skills, experience, and education because you are seeking to pad your demographic numbers. It is not cost effective to hire people on their aesthetic, if you can believe it, unless you are a modeling agency.
At all. And what do you see typically are the things that really have to be in place to move that needle? Because I do hear senior leaders and companies say, we really do want to increase the numbers.
What numbers are you talking about? Define the numbers. Define the needle that is wanting to be moved. What are you talking about? Be specific. Or are you afraid to be specific because it might tend to indicate something that might not quite be legal or ethical?
Of women. And we do.
Of women. Okay. All right. So it's just about the numbers of women. That's the only thing to consider first and foremost, the numbers of women, moving the needle on women. All right. I imagine that was the case, at least primarily given the show's title, but all the same, I just needed to be sure to know what we're talking about.
We do want diversity, in our senior ranks. We really you hear them say it, they're passionate about it, and ultimately another year goes by and they haven't done it, right?
Or, and here's a thought, or maybe on average, many women sacrifice a high-level position or a long-term career in favor of raising a family. It's just a thought. If you're talking about not getting the numbers you want, not moving the needle, and somehow these numbers don't end up the way that you want them to, are there any other factors that might be contributing to that have nothing to do with discrimination, but have a lot more to do with personal choice? Are you guys even going to mention that? And just because you say, hey, we're trying to increase work-life balance to increase that. Okay, well, that could be a possibility, But if someone sacrifices the time and the effort and the hours to their family, which isn't a sin, it's a choice and it's perfectly fine, that doesn't then lead them to a high-level position, because those high-level positions often require a lot more time, a lot more experience, a lot more investment of work hours and overtime and dedication to the job versus real life. If you're not willing or interested in doing that, regardless of your gender, are you going to end up in one of those high-level jobs? Probably not as often, right?
And I think this is happening. We're hearing this more and more because so many companies have declared these goals publicly, and now they have to report we didn't, or we only moved it like a half or 1% or even 2%. What do you see in those situations?
Yeah, in those situations, that's a great question, and that is very true. And in those situations, what most often happens is that the goal is set, but there is no sustainable underpinning in terms of practical actions that are required as a part of the operational processes. So,
okay, well then give us an example of a practical application of the operational processes that you think would move the needle.
For example, You may have a goal and say, we're going to have, kind of go after these diversity talents. But when you look at where you're seeking the talent, right, you're going to the same markets. You have the same university. You're not opening up to historically Black colleges and universities.
Okay. So why is that? Okay. And has Google not attempted that? Has Pfizer not attempted that? I mean, if it was that easy, if that's the only thing you have to do, hey, let's have a job fair at this specific college because this specific college has more of one particular race than others because that's what we're aiming for. Never mind, talent. Our first consideration is race, but let's say that is your consideration. That's perfectly fine. Okay, well, if that's all you need to do, are you telling me that these companies aren't doing that and haven't been doing that? I mean, it sounds pretty simple. Have a job fair at College X because College X has the type of people that we want to hire. It seems pretty simple to me. Why aren't companies willing to do that?
You're not looking at individuals or people that have had other roles and now are cross-fertilizing experiences.
No. You're not looking at individuals at all. No. You guys don't care about individuality. You care about demographic fit. You're talking about gender. You're talking about race. Individuals? That is at best a secondary consideration, often a tertiary consideration to race and gender. Individuals, talent, personal skill. You just told us that you want to target universities because of their racial makeup. You can't walk that back.
That can be seen as value add to the roles. And another thing, what I would say is it has to be embedded in your talent management processes.
What? Discrimination on the basis of race or gender? Well, I agree. If those are the only numbers you care about, you would have to embed that philosophy in your recruitment and hiring processes.
Meaning that when you're looking at high potential programs or leadership development programs, you got to look at the composition of them. If you are seeing that, 80 to 85% of your participants in your high potential or leadership development program are white male, how do you think you're going to get the progression of diversity if you're literally doing your high touch intervention on one homogenous group?
Yes, because as we know, all white males are homogenous. They have the exact same philosophies, exact same perspectives, exact same experiences, exact same ideas, exact same ways of thinking. That's why Republicans and Democrats, who are white males, agree on everything. That's why someone who lives in San Francisco has the exact same mindset as someone who lives in Texas, as long as they're a white male. Obviously, they can sit down and have a drink together and disagree on nothing. I'm glad our speaker finally said it so plainly. These are our concerns. I know that a group of white men in a room do not possess diversity, that they are homogenous. On what basis? Well, aesthetics. Because we don't care about individuals. We don't care about talent, skills, knowledge, education. We don't care about ideas, ways of thinking, perspectives, backgrounds. We care about aesthetics. That's it. Well, I mean, it took 20 minutes nearly for them to finally get to the meat of the matter, as it were.
Mm-hmm. And so you may even get pushback and say, oh, they met the criteria. The other people didn't, so that's why they're chosen. And then you have to dig a little bit deeper. So they met the criteria.
So what's the criteria, right?
Yeah. If it's lower level than in the organization, if they've had to have certain career moves or certain jobs, then you see the same barriers exist.
Yeah, if you have a standard requirement of experience, skills, and education, then yeah, you're going to get people that presumably have those experiences, skills, and education. You're the ones pinning a racial or sexual component onto your considerations for hiring and recruitment. So you do not care about merit. Let's just make it plain. Okay, merit is not even on the radar in your first steps? And what is the company's goal? You decried window dressing not too long ago, but now all you're talking about is which way the drapes are hung.
So you have to make a conscious decision to say, I'm going to over-index on this population because we want there to be a representation and we want them to be invested in for their growth.
You want to make a conscious decision to over-index this population. Well, that's a fancy way of saying I'm going to apply racial or sexual discrimination in my recruitment and hiring practices. Man.
Not only their growth, but their sustainability when they get there.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I think is a dangerous thing, and that thing I do not purport to, is putting people in role just to fill a quota.
Well, that's exactly what you've been talking about this entire time. All you've been talking about is the numbers based on the aesthetic demographic. That's it. Just putting people in a role because of the numbers. You've only been talking about the numbers. Move that needle. Hit those numbers. You don't purport to do that? That's everything that you've been saying to this point. Okay, well, I'm going to back up a second. Let's back up a second. Okay, well, now go ahead, correct and or contradict yourself.
You have to make a conscious decision to say, I'm going to over-index on this population because we want there to be a representation and we want them to be invested in for their growth.
Okay, so you want to over-index on this population in order to have representation. But
not only their growth, but their sustainability when they get there.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I think is a dangerous thing, and that thing I do not purport to, is putting people in role just to fill a quota or a number.
Yes.
Because if you do not have efforts in place to not only help people get there organically through development, through career experience, and then when they're there, offer the support, right? If you think about it, offer the scaffolding, right? Everything, and that what I mean by scaffolding, the mentorship, the advocacy, the training, the hands-on experience, then they're not going to be successful.
Yes, but the thing is that comes after, right? The first consideration is bringing in people from underrepresented demographics in order to non-homogenize your workforce. Because skills, experience, education, those kind of requirements you put on a job application or a job description that someone has to meet at the minimum before they're considered for the job, you just downplayed those. Okay, so you want to hire for representation and then train them up into the position after you've already hired them for their representative qualities. Okay, so if someone comes in already with the requisite experience and skills and education, but they're not the right demographic fit for you, you'd rather set that person aside and recruit someone for representation and then spend the extra time, energy, money, and resources on training up that person to equate the person that came to the job interview ahead of time with all of those abilities just to ensure you have representation. Does that sound efficient to you? Because that's what I'm hearing you say. Doesn't sound very cost effective to me. But then what do I know? I'm just an English major.
And oftentimes when you see your example you said earlier, when goals are made and that they see an initial spike, but then it falls off, that indicates to me that there's really no systemic interventions that are being done to carry these processes through the way that the organizational people, leadership development, and retention efforts are being driven.
Or you're hiring people on the basis of their look and not on the basis of their abilities. And then when they get into jobs that they're not suited for because they lack the skills, experience, and education necessary, and you hired them not on those terms, but because you're trying to hit some demographic number, then you're going to have people that get frustrated either with the job that they can't do, or their results are going to be poor, and they're either going to be fired or they're going to quit or they're going to be laid off because profits drop and productivity drops, or they don't like the job anymore, or they're frustrated, or their peers or supervisors can't do anything with them because they don't know what they're doing. Because you didn't hire for knowledge and skill, you hired for the look. All of this could be very much diminished as a problem if you would hire people on the basis of what they can do. But that's not your focus. You already told us.
Yeah, that's what I've definitely, you talked about quotas. Somebody was just telling me at a conference I attended a few weeks ago that the company she just left, she was one of two senior leaders, and they were trying to increase the percentage of senior leaders in her company. And so they promoted somebody to a position that they were not qualified.
Isn't that, who cares? You guys were not concerned about that just a couple of minutes ago. You were concerned with the number of women. The number of women in leadership roles. There were no other considerations. Women, the number of women. But now you're decrying quotas.
In order to meet the numbers. And then the two women in senior leadership were leaving, not for any, for their own career reasons. So then the company, after having done this, like putting this woman in a position where she perhaps wasn't ready for, and I'm doubtful that they had all of the supports in place, now they're behind their numbers again. And it just seems like there's like this vicious cycle. If we're not doing it, I hate to put it this way, but like doing it the right way, right? If we're not doing it with good intentions and we're doing it just to save face publicly.
Not doing it with good intentions, but to save face publicly. Is there a difference anymore with the corporate mindset? Is there a difference? We want to improve the gender wage gap. We need to put more women into leadership roles. It's the right thing to do. DEI is not just for business, but it's the right thing to do. The vicious cycle. Okay, we have a job opening. This job requires that the person have, at minimum, these skills and this education. Person comes in. Do they have the skills and education necessary, or can they demonstrate a reasonable equivalent? If the answer is yes, well, they go into the consideration pile. If the answer is no, I'm sorry, best of luck in your endeavors. That's about as pragmatic and binary as need to be about it. But that is not what you guys are concerned with. You want to hit the numbers, but you don't want the people coming in to fill these numbers to have to work to deserve the position they're getting. You want them to be trained after they've gotten the position to acquire the skills they would have needed to get the position in the first place. The vicious circle is listening to you guys and your just malleable intentions and goals. You don't want it to be a quota system. Oh, but we need more women in these positions. You don't want to put somebody in a position who's not capable of doing the job because that's a lot of turnover, but you don't want them to have to actually have those skills and abilities before getting the job. You're not going to solve this. This is insanity. This entire conversation so far is an exercise in insanity.
Because we set a goal and now we'd have to say we failed and then examine why we failed. Then it just creates more problems.
Yeah. And I would even say that I know that there's wonderful intention and I know that there is, a true desire to improve. However, I think that there is not a holistic intervention that is seen. It literally is looking at checking a box or putting a Band-Aid over something. Hey, if we have this and we get the numbers temporarily, we're going to give ourselves a round of applause.
You just decried. I'm sorry. This is just ridiculous. Hey, here's a thought. What if, and I know, just, go with me on this one. What if you considered someone's ability and merit full stop? What if you just considered someone's ability and merit full stop? Because you guys are not concerning yourselves with anything other than aesthetics. You're not. You've got a target of demographic representation. Not excellence in ability, not excellence in work ethic or professionalism or experience. That is miles distance. That is a distant prospect from what you're concerning yourselves with. You guys are building your own vicious circle. All right. If anything that you've suggested so far as a solution to these problems was the magic bullet, well, then every company would be doing it and there wouldn't be a problem. Right? You think Google lacks the resources to do anything you might have to suggest in solving this problem? Look at their demographic numbers. I mean, every time they release a new report on their diversity goals and everything else, they always seem to just not quite make them. Right? Facebook, Google, all these big companies, they've had these scandals about being so pro-diversity and DEI is the best and we're going to be a better company and we're da-da-da-da. And then you actually look at their numbers and somehow, some way, they never seem to improve, which means those companies are obviously racist and sexist, right?
And claim victory won, where quite frankly, there needs to be a realistic view that in order to make sustainable change, you have to give yourself about 24 to 36 months, because that change will require a change in the way that you seek talent.
No. Sorry. I already know that that's not true. I did a video, it's now a couple of years ago, on Google and their DEI efforts. And they had to put out their annual report of what their numbers looked like. And it was something like the numbers between where they were in 2017 to 2019 or something like that, right? And the one part, it was either, it's been a while now, it was either Google or Facebook. Anyway, it was one of those two, and they put out their annual report, and they had to ashamedly announce that between this period of time, whether it was 1 or 2 years or whatever, the amount of African-American employees only went up 0.5% or something, like something exceedingly small, right? And yet you've got this company that they had access to all the same wisdom that any other company could. They had the public declaration of what they intended to do. They had all the high-minded and virtuous, crusades set up to do this. And they couldn't move the quote-unquote needle more than about a percentage point or so on the one demographic that at the time was like, oh, we have to do this, that, and the other because otherwise we're racist. Well, there's something else going on. Okay, there's something else going on than just hiring people because of what they look like, which you can't do because that's illegal. You guys are recommending an illegal philosophy on hiring, recruitment, and retention and promotion. I mean, setting that aside, as you've already described, the efficiency of just putting people into place because of what they look like in order to fit some demographic goal. Yeah, quotas don't work unless there's some talent or something behind it. If you said, I'm going to hire nothing but the most talented women for these roles, well, got news for you. Even then, you're breaking the law because you're discriminating on the basis of gender. And if you make that declaration as a company, you are setting yourselves up for civil rights lawsuits. Right? Someone that comes along and says, why wasn't that position open for me? Because I'm not the right gender, I'm not the right race. If you openly say this is for a women's opportunity, you've already set yourself up for a fall. To this day, I do not understand how private companies and public organizations outside of maybe colleges with affirmative action get away with this without being sued into the dirt.
In the prototype of what success in leadership looks like, that has to be challenged. Because if you have people, you have roles and jobs and leaders that traditionally has been held by a particular prototype of a leader, it's going to be hard to go against that. For example, I remember at one of my organizations, it was in a scientific organization, and we were looking at diversifying this very scientific area of the company. And what we ended up doing, was realizing that it was difficult for us to even get candidates that fit a different profile, gender, ethnicity, background, experience. So I decided to have my team embark on an audit of the job descriptions. I said, I just want to see what the job descriptions look like, because it really is hard for me to believe that we can't, in this area, find everything. And literally, lo and behold, got out one job description that was raised, was literally, it said 35 years of experience.
Oh,
literally, it said that. Went to this particular school, and it had 3 schools that had this particular master's degree program. Others did, but that's what they had done in the past. They literally replicated the person that was in the role before and made their whole experience the job description. And we found that quite often, that it was just literally a mental model that was put in people's head as this scientific leader needs to look, sound, have a pedigree of this background to be successful.
Look? Where was the look? Sound? Look and sound. 35 years experience, a master's degree from one of these 3 schools. Well, I mean, I guess you could consider, like, say, okay, are those still the 3 best schools for this particular subject? Things change over time. The quality of some schools change over time. You might want to reassess that. Look and sound. What? And I love the fact that our interviewer got exasperated at the 35 years experience before anything else was mentioned. What has that got to do with anything? Okay, well then, how did you change that job description, and what were the results?
And of course, we scrapped that. We changed that. We started looking at other educational areas, master's programs.
Okay, so you still had specific master's programs that would qualify. Did you throw out the 3 that were there before? Were they no longer relevant?
We started looking at different years of experience.
Why? Why? I mean, I need to know more context about the job. Different years of experience. I'm guessing you mean fewer.
They had lesser experience, but moved into particular areas that would qualify. And a lot of times that's the work that's not done.
But we're talking about a specific job position, right? We're not talking about different job positions. Why wouldn't you want somebody with 35 years of experience if the job position is something like senior tech developer or whatever? I mean, are you splitting up that job into multiple littler jobs? And how does any of that ensure that you're going to get the demographic look that you desire? How did any of that change the outcome of who ended up in those positions to a type that you liked to look at, to a type you liked to listen to? Because you care about the look and the sound, which has and says nothing about the requirements of education and years of experience.
That real diagnostic in terms of systems, processes, and what are we not challenging because it is so embedded and ingrained in us as a success factor that is causing us not to be able to open the aperture and invite differences, experience, backgrounds.
No. If I have a job that has a specific function in the company, I want somebody that can do that job in the company. If I have a different job in a different department, well, then I can have differences from the other job that has different job response. Okay. Were your efforts successful in bringing in people that you liked to look at? That's my question. You change these things about the job description. So did you achieve the goal of bringing in the kind of people that you liked to look at? Now, listen to that question I'm asking, because that is the problem that she is saying they're attempting to solve. It's a ridiculous question to have to ask, but that's the one that follows from what you said.
Yes.
Ageism.
What?
Are you getting value from listening to the Women Taking the Lead podcast?
Am I getting value? I mean, as far as sort of like cynical, sardonic entertainment and information, yeah, sure, I guess. I was hoping to hear something different than I've heard from other places in the past and diversity consultants. I'm not really hearing anything different, but the kind of hypocrisy, the kind of doublespeak is certainly unique per the individual, because I look at individual merit in that regard. Our interviewer has asked in places some really good questions, but in other areas has been far too glad-handy about things. Can I skip over this? Hello?
Podcast might be
No. Okay.
open.
No.
A setting
No.
by click
Is this the end of the interview, or is it just...
one makes a difference.
Oh my gosh.
You just named, like, I think two huge problems. Is one, we just get used to the way things are always done, and we don't stop and examine, like things we maybe haven't looked at before, like job descriptions or onboarding processes, and how our benefits packages are put together and presented. Things that are very basic but are so vital.
Okay, my only question is, are our numbers as far as profitability and productivity up or down from the previous year? If they're not up, if they're stagnant, how can we make them go up? If they're down from the previous year, something's broken. I mean, I hate to be sort of cold equations about it, but if I were running a business, that'd be my first concern. And you guys don't care about that. That is not the problem you're seeking to solve. Through none of this have you talked about productivity, product quality, or efficiency. You've only talked about aesthetics. You've only talked about quotas based on demographic. You don't see the kinds of people you want to see. Oh, we changed the job description. And?
To that talent acquisition process.
You're not talking about talent. It's not talent acquisition. It's demographic acquisition. You're not using the correct terms here for what you've been describing. Demographic acquisition. You want more women. You want more quote unquote underrepresented groups. Whatever. Talent is, as I say, at best, a secondary, likely tertiary consideration next to gender and race. You've said it yourself.
And also that we're asking for change. And sometimes when we start change, people get scared. Like, oh my God, like, what if we do offer this position to somebody who has a different background or a different job experience, went to a different school? What will, like, people almost like the sky is falling, what will happen?
Yeah, if you change or lower the standards of what has worked in the past without explaining how it's supposed to make any sense for the job, then yeah, it would worry me, especially if you're coming and saying, we're going to change this because we don't like the skin color or genitals of the people who have had the job in the past. That's scary. You know why that's scary? Because not only is it racist, it's also sexist, but it also has nothing to do with the quality of the service you're providing or the product you're producing. That is a scary thought, that you're going to inject racial and sexist policies into a company first and foremost, to somebody that's trying to do their job, to somebody who went to school for years and worked and worked and worked to get into a position. And now the quality of what they did and the effort they went to get that job doesn't matter. That is scary. It's scary for their careers going forward. It's scary for the industry at large, whatever industry you're talking about. But you guys apparently can't see that because you are color focused.
to us. And I'm going to take us in a direction of, I almost feel like it's like I'm saying the sky is blue, because to me it's so obvious, and you know this information as well, but I don't know that everyone does. And I feel like it needs to be stated that, that having more women in leadership, more women in senior leadership, and more people of color in leadership and in senior leadership increases the bottom line of the company.
Oh, it does. You have any proof of that? That's all it takes? Then why is there so much turnover? If that is the only consideration necessary, then I guess the solution is to hire people on the basis of their race and gender, right? Because that's the only consideration. Oh, there's a senior leadership job open. Do we have anyone who's of the right type to put into it? Never mind whether they're qualified. You know, that concern that you cited just a couple of minutes ago? Please go on.
Like profitability increases, morale increases, like the sustainability of the company to last over the course of time increases. And yet we still have some systems in place that are making it hard for these people to attain those positions. And so,
yeah, you know what the systems in place are for those people to attain those positions simply on the basis of what they look like? Yeah, it's called the law. That those aren't considerations to be had. That I'm not hiring people because they have the correct skin color. You know, a policy that was, you know, kind of frowned upon, I don't know, back in the 50s. Where there were signs out that told you before you even walked in the door who was allowed to apply for a job. Are you listening to yourself?
So I've been saying it a lot, so I'm going to repeat myself for those of you who've been listening to the company. Like yes, people need to be trained and get mentorship, and
people need to actually have the requisite skills and experience necessary to do the job. I know it's crazy.
Supports and things of that nature, but companies have to change if they want to hit these goals. If they want the benefits of having women and people of color in leadership and senior leadership positions, they really have to make these changes. Otherwise, what's going to happen is like what you and I have been talking about, where the needle moves and then it goes down and then it moves and then it goes down.
You know why it moves, then it goes down? Because companies are doing exactly what you are suggesting. Hiring people for demographic fit who are not prepared for it just so they can fill out a quota or make their numbers look nice quarter to quarter. Because when you put in these DEI initiatives that care more about the window dressing of the company than they do about the effectiveness of the employees in their jobs, you get turnover, you get frustration, you get people either quitting or getting fired, or you get entire departments dropping off because their efficiency goes through the floor because you don't care about the quality of the merit. Put the race and gender aside. Hire people that know what they're doing, regardless of what they look like. That's not the consideration. It's not the consideration principally. It's not the consideration legally. But you guys are contradicting yourself every 3 seconds in what you say you want to have happen, but then citing the inherent problems with doing what you're saying you want to have happen.
What is, because sometimes I'm like, another study comes out and it says it again, you know?
Yeah, another study comes out, says it again. Why doesn't it just happen? Why isn't the magic bullet just exactly what I just said? Why is there no correlation and causation? If it was just as simple as we need to populate our workforce and our senior leadership with the right skin colors, we'll succeed. Is that really what you're suggesting be done? That's all that it takes. That's the only factor necessary for success. Racial segregation in your hiring practices. Gender segregation in your hiring practices. That's what you just said.
And you're so immersed in this work. What has been your experience in having conversations with companies who might, you know, are like just there? They're just ready to start making these changes.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that I feel like there is an overall sentiment of wanting to do good in diversity, equity, inclusion space across multinational companies. I think that what we have experienced through the global pandemic, with the people responding, to being, the isolation and the mental health challenges that has risen, because of being quarantined and then really sitting through.
What are you talking about? What? Okay, we have gone tangent city here. Is this going to come back to something relevant?
All of these, racial injustices and the social climate that we have had. I think organizations are now stepping up to saying, hey, we have to be a part of the solution. So I'll preface this by saying that I do think that there is an overwhelming desire and effort to do well. I also want to say that in that desire or effort, it's still relying on past and historical belief sets and actions, which do not allow for their progress not only to be made, but to be sustained.
Such as?
And one of the things that I share and readily kind of bring up to make sure that it's top of mind organization is not only looking at where you want your talents and skills to be today, but really look at where your talents and skills should be tomorrow.
You have not concerned yourself with talent or skill throughout this entire process, except in those instances where, we don't want to put somebody in a position that they're not prepared for. When your entire goal was to put people in positions because of what they looked like. Thank you, Derek LaRue, once again, so much for your generosity and support. Thank you so much for that, Derek. Hope you're having a good Sunday. Appreciate it very much. Okay, we got another 10 minutes in real time left. We'll see how much we can squeeze out of this still.
It should be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now. And if you think about bringing on complementary skills, really looking at your talent and adding skills, ability, insights, generational differences, that's going to help you be more competitive, more ingrained, having the ability to really drive innovation in a meaningful way, there's no strategy in that will not have diversity at the center.
What? I mean, if you mean the actual definition of diversity, people with different perspectives, life experiences, etc., you're correct. But here's the thing. You don't care about that. You told us at the beginning that if you have someone coming to the table who is of a marginalized community, but your workforce is homogenous and it's all white men, well, what if it's a white man who's been in the industry for 30 years versus a white man who's been in the industry for 5? The 30-year industry guy has some very old school knowledge and ideas about how things work, and the 5-year guy has experience with technology that the old guy doesn't. I mean, there's a diversity right there. But you don't care about that. That's not your concern. That's not your focus. That's not your goal. You've told us that over and over and over and over again. Now we're getting to skills and experience and talent? Are you sure about that? Is that what you mean?
It just won't happen. There has to be an openness, willingness, and a necessity to bring in more women, more.
Listen to this. You can't go a minute without contradicting yourself. You go on personal merit, skills, experience, and talents. Like, okay, good. Now we're getting somewhere. But then you come right back to a common denominator that is not a determinative factor in someone's ability. It is just an aesthetic. Why can't you set this aside? You can't. You wouldn't have a job if you did. You're not here to find the best people for the job. You're here to fill a quota. You're here to move the needle. You rail against window dressing, and yet that's all you're doing. You can't avoid coming back to it. What does being a woman, just being a woman, have to do with skills, experience, etc. for a particular job? I mean, I'm sure there is one out there. I'm sure you can give me an example, right? But when you're talking about these highly technical fields that you've been talking about, you work for Google, you work for Pfizer. Okay, what does specifically being a woman do and automatically let an employer know that they possess as far as skills and experience? What can I know about a person's skills, experience, talent, education, and wisdom simply on the basis that I can tell that they're a female, whatever a woman is these days? What you gosh.
People, different generations, more people of color, because these are the demographics that are changing and evolving the way we work, how we work, and the decisions in our lifestyle decisions that we have in meaningful ways.
How does someone being a woman change the way we work? How does someone being a particular skin color change the way we work without any other elements to their personality or abilities? How?
And so that has been probably the most effective coaching that I have gone, that has allowed me then to be bold and progressive with how we will kind of approach this, redefining what success looks like, redefining what the talent looks like, but also how it could be shaped for tomorrow.
Like redefining what success looks like. Okay. What does success look like now when you're not considering someone's abilities and just looking at numerical demographic fit?
And that has excited me because there's less focus on just filling numbers and quotas and getting butts and seats, and more focus on what is the value add? What are the insights that we're going to get from female leaders? How are we making sure that we're building, not only getting them in the door, but building pipelines of growth within our organization?
I'm done. Not only am I at the end of the time that I allotted myself for this, but I'm just done. We keep going backwards and forwards over and over again, contradicting ourselves. It's not about quotas, but we need more women in the positions, right? It's not about window dressing, but this entire workforce is homogenous. Okay. Like I say, if you can understand that, if you can repeat that same kind of rhetoric, you too could be a diversity consultant or chief diversity officer. Because time and time and time and time again, I've heard the exact same tempo of explanation and rhetoric. So if you think you can master that without having to really do anything or know anything, I did a whole episode where I looked at, okay, what does it take to become a diversity consultant? What requirements are necessary? And we learned from people who are doing it that there really is none. There's no specific, master's degree you have to have, no specific education. I remember when I did that, the first lady that was in the presentation, if I remember correctly, she went to school and got a very, it was something like organizational psychology or something. She got a degree in organizational psychology, something to that effect. And I thought, wow, now that actually makes some sense. That sounds like something that could be directly applicable to the ideas behind, if not the actual effect of, DEI. And then as she got into her presentation, she said, yeah, I found out that wasn't really necessary. You don't really need a college degree to get into diversity consulting. And you could kind of see her deflate with that admission that she probably spent years and God knows how much money to get that degree to go into a field that she didn't have to go through all that trouble to get into. Oh, man. I think Chicago Mike, word salad, bingo. Yeah. I mean, just as an overall for this presentation, I think this is justified.
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
But there you go. Yes, this was not something from a few years ago. This was an interview that took place, or at least was published within the last month. So this is still, as we've seen for years now, the same kind of rhetoric, the same kind of cyclical thinking on the subject, avoiding the realities of what you're suggesting, but also suggesting that somehow it's a good thing to discriminate. Where does the legal consideration come in, if not the moral consideration of valuing people on the basis of their gender or their skin color? I don't know. That seems to that's gone by the wayside. That doesn't matter anymore. We have to assess people on the basis of their gender. We have to value them on what they look like, first and foremost. Talent, ability, skills. Oh, we'll train them up after the fact. We just need to make sure that the demographics of our workforce look correctly first. Take a second here for things you guys have to say, and then I will wrap up. ARC 210. I could never be a DEI consultant because I'm not a woman of color. I've seen DEI consultants of all stripes, truth be told. I mean, I'd have to do like a survey to figure out the percentages. More often than not, you will see someone in the role that is not white, which always, but aside from that, it doesn't always have to be. I've seen white women, seen white guys, seen Asian women, Asian men, black women, black men. It really is. It really runs the board. And I can't say for certain. So, let's see. Script Doctor. Hello, Script Doctor. I bet they call it reverse discrimination, failing to realize that it is all discrimination. Yeah. There's no such thing as reverse discrimination. There's just discrimination. They try to put that on there. I love it when somebody comes out and says there's no such thing as reverse discrimination. And I'm like, you're right, there isn't. And then they go on to say something to the effect of, because racism can only come from places of power and white people have all the power. And like, no, that's not true. Yeah. It's a mind fuck is what it's called. Let's see. Gen T Maxi, if you repeat the same lie over and over again, it'll become true. But that's not true. That's not true. In the media and in people's minds and everything else, paranoid. And so, yeah. But if you think about it for 3 seconds, apply some critical thinking, listen to what people are saying. And especially, this is a prime example. If you ever want to give somebody a test just to see if their critical thinking skills and listening skills are on point, have them listen to this podcast and just listen, have them listen and say, okay, just listen to this and tell me if it makes any sense, what they're saying, right? And don't give too much preamble. Don't pad it or anything, and see what they come out with. See what lessons they learn from what's being said. Well, our goal is this, but we don't want this. But then we do want this, but our goal isn't that. Within a 5-minute span. Critical thinking. This is a good litmus test for just critically thinking through what someone is saying. Whether you believe in it or not, whether you agree with it or not, what the people are actually saying, and does it match up with what they said 2 minutes ago or 30 seconds ago? A couple more here, and then we will wrap up for the day. Let's see. Rotten Corpse. I still can't. Which talks more crap their butt or their... I mean, okay. I don't know what to say to that other than, yes, I've listened to a lot of nonsense over the years. And I was just asked, the other day by somebody in my real life. They say, why do you keep listening to this stuff? You know what you're going to hear. And my answer is, I don't know what I'm going to hear. Because from person to person, individual to individual, I always hear something a little different. Either something that is completely couched language or something that is all over the place like this one was. Every individual has a different way of presenting what they're doing. And we just listened to someone who has apparently been in the top diversity officer spot for major companies. And nothing of what she said sounded any more plausible, reasonable, legal, or rational than any other diversity consultant or executive that I've ever listened to prior to this, from even smaller companies or just someone sitting in their bedroom giving a webcam presentation on their process. That tells me something. I'm learning something as we go. And the thing is, you'd never hear any of this in the mainstream. If a mainstream media outlet actually had to listen to this rhetoric and this justification for action, and if something like this was put out on the wire and someone actually asked some forthright questions about what are you talking about, but you won't see that. because they know how inherently contradictory it is, how inherently unethical it is, and likely illegal. But somehow here it is, and somebody's getting paid for it. And I think that's fascinating. I still think that is fascinating. The same philosophies that would vilify anyone else of a different look in a different context at a podium wearing a pointy mask would get them rightly vilified off the stage. Well, you can talk about it here. Oh, yeah, we have to hire people on the basis of their look. There are preferred looks and there are non-preferred looks. There are preferred genders and there are non-preferred genders. I mean, nice work if you can get it, I guess. If you can set aside, I don't know, your personal pride or your critical thinking. Anyway, that's the Sunday stream. I want to thank you all for joining me today for this adventure once again into the wonderful world of diversity, equity, and inclusion philosophy. If you didn't learn anything from it, well, I apologize. If you learned how to listen for contradictions in people's rhetoric on things that they say they're experts in, then maybe you learned something. If you agree, if you disagree, either way, please leave a comment below about whether or not you liked the show or didn't like the show. Please, on your way out, if you haven't already, hit that like button. Apparently, it helps somehow with the algorithm. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me here Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence, where I'll once again go over an off-brand TED Talk for entertainment and fun. I call it Funtertainment. Sure. Why not? And thank you, Chicago Mike, for the good job, Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Whoa, wee. Whoa, whoa.
Yes, a tailed feature, Dogcat Fox. Thank you, Chicago Mike. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity, whether it was to myself or to the GoFundMe at the top of the chat box, to Little Puppy Rosebud and the Fractured Hip. Appreciate that very much. Since the show started, we've gone up $25 on the fundraiser. Now $625 of an $800 goal. Thank you guys so much, the anonymous donators in the last hour and 14 minutes or so. If you're not able to donate to that, I can completely understand. If you're able to share the link from the GoFundMe out on social media, please do so and help out little Rosebud get healed up soon for her family. With that, everyone, again, thank you for joining me. Hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday and a good rest of your weekend. Hope you have a good week ahead of you. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.